Billionaire never told his assistant how he felt until he saw her with another man. She knew the exact moment he would need his coffee, but she had no idea he'd been watching her for 3 years. The 42nd floor of Sterling Tech buzzed with the controlled chaos of a billion-dollar empire, but Isabella Rodriguez moved through it like she owned the place. Her long blonde hair caught the Seattle morning light streaming through floor-to-ceiling windows as she balanced 3 phones, 2 tablets, and a steaming cup of black coffee. No sugar, no cream, exactly as Nathan Sterling had taken it every morning for the past 3 years. "Mr. Sterling, your 10 o'clock with the Tokyo investors moved to 10:30, she called through his office door, her voice carrying that perfect balance of professionalism and warmth that made everyone, from janitors to board members, feel like they mattered. "And your mother called again." From behind the mahogany door came a sound that might have been a grunt of acknowledgement. Isabella smiled to herself. In 3 years, she'd learned to speak Nathan Sterling's language of silences, sighs, and subtle shifts in posture. Other assistants had lasted maybe 6 months before his cold efficiency drove them away. But Isabella, she'd figured out the code. She pushed through the door without knocking, a privilege earned through countless late nights, crisis management, and an uncanny ability to anticipate his needs before he voiced them. Nathan sat behind his desk, dark hair slightly mussed, tie loosened just enough to suggest he'd been running his hands through it. At 35, he commanded rooms with a look, closed million-dollar deals with a nod, and maintained an emotional distance that kept everyone guessing. Everyone except Isabella. "Rough night?" she asked, setting the coffee exactly 3 inches from his right hand. "The way he liked it? Define rough." His voice carried that familiar gravelly undertone that emerged when he was tired. He didn't look up from the quarterly report spread across his desk, but Isabella caught the slight tension in his shoulders, the way his pen hovered over the same line he'd been reading for the past 5 minutes. "Well, you've been wearing the same shirt since yesterday. There's a takeout container from May's kitchen hiding behind your monitor, and you've read that same paragraph 4 times. Isabella perched on the edge of the chair across from his desk, crossing her legs with practiced elegance. "So either you discovered time travel, or you spent the night here again." Nathan's eyes flicked up, meeting hers for exactly 2.3 seconds. She'd unconsciously started timing these moments months ago, before dropping back to his papers. The Nakamura deal needed attention. The Nakamura deal was finalized last week. Isabella's voice carried gentle amusement. "Try again, Mr. Sterling." For the briefest moment, something flickered across Nathan's face. Surprise? Appreciation? Before Isabella could decipher it, his phone buzzed with an incoming call, but instead of reaching for it immediately, as he always did, Nathan hesitated. His eyes found hers again, and this time he didn't look away. "How do you do that?" he asked quietly. "Do what?" "See through everything." His voice held a note she'd never heard before. Vulnerable, almost wondering. "Everyone else sees what they want to see. You see?" The phone stopped buzzing. The moment stretched between them like a held breath. Isabella felt her pulse quicken, a warmth spreading through her chest that had nothing to do with the Seattle sunshine. For 3 years, their relationship had danced around moments like this. Glances that lasted too long, accidental touches that sent electricity up her spine, conversations that felt like they were speaking in code. "I see you," she said simply. Nathan's hand stilled on his pen. The words hung in the air between them, loaded with 3 years of unspoken understanding, of professional boundaries that felt increasingly thin, of a connection that both terrified and thrilled her. The phone rang again, shattering the moment. Nathan blinked as if waking from a trance and reached for it with mechanical precision. "Sterling." His voice had returned to its usual professional clip, but Isabella noticed the slight tremor in his fingers as he loosened his tie another fraction. She stood, smoothing her navy blazer, trying to ignore the way her heart was still racing. "I'll reschedule your lunch meeting. You need sleep more than you need to impress the Peterson group." As she reached the door, Nathan's voice stopped her. "Isabella." She turned, hope blooming in her chest like a dangerous flower. "Thank you." "For the coffee." The disappointment was sharp and quick, but Isabella had perfected the art of hiding her feelings behind professional competence. "Of course, Mr. Sterling, that's what I'm here for." But as she closed the door behind her, she missed the way Nathan's facade crumbled the moment she was gone. How he pressed his palms against his eyes, fighting against feelings he'd buried so deep he'd almost convinced himself they didn't exist. How he picked up the coffee cup with hands that weren't quite steady, inhaling the familiar scent and wondering when exactly his brilliant, beautiful assistant had become the most important part of his carefully controlled world. Outside his office, Isabella returned to her desk, fingers flying across her keyboard as she rearranged his day. But her mind wasn't on meetings or conference calls. It was on the way he'd looked at her, like she was a puzzle he desperately wanted to solve, like she mattered in a way that went far beyond quarterly reports and business dealings. She'd been Nathan Sterling's assistant for 3 years. She knew his coffee order, his mother's birthday, the exact words to use when declining meetings he didn't want to take. She knew everything about his professional life. What she didn't know was that in the silence of his office, Nathan Sterling was falling apart. And tomorrow, everything would change. The phone call that would change everything came on a Tuesday, and she almost didn't answer. Isabella's fingers paused over her keyboard as the unfamiliar number flashed across her phone screen. In the 3 years she'd worked for Nathan Sterling, she'd developed an almost supernatural ability to filter calls. Investors, reporters, his mother's weekly attempts to set him up with lovely girls from good families. This number, however, was different. Clean, professional, intriguing. Sterling Tech, Nathan Sterling's office. This is Isabella. Ms. Rodriguez? The voice was warm, confident, with just a hint of a Boston accent. This is Dominic Hayes from Meridian Ventures. We met briefly at the Founders Summit last month. Isabella's memory kicked in immediately, a useful skill when managing a billionaire's social calendar. Dominic Hayes, 32, venture capitalist, Harvard MBA, devastating smile, and the kind of easy charm that made networking feel like conversation. She'd watched him work the room at the summit, never pushy, always genuinely interested in the person he was speaking with. Of course, Mr. Hayes. How can I help you today? Actually, I was hoping to speak with you, not about business. There was something different in his voice now, less formal, more personal. I was wondering if you'd be interested in attending the Meridian Foundation Gala this Saturday, as my guest. Isabella's pen slipped from her fingers, clattering onto her desk. Through the glass walls of Nathan's office, she could see him on a conference call, his back to her as he stared out at Elliott Bay. His shoulders were rigid with the kind of tension she'd learned to read like a weather forecast. That's very kind of you, Mr. Hayes, but Dominic, please. And before you say no, let me be honest. His laugh was genuine, self-deprecating. I've been thinking about our conversation for weeks. You mentioned you studied international relations at Georgetown, and I couldn't stop thinking about your insights on the Southeast Asian markets. Most people at these events want to talk about their portfolios or their vacation homes. You talked about economic policy like it was poetry. Heat crept up Isabella's neck. She'd forgotten that conversation, a brief exchange in the summit's coffee line where she'd found herself debating trade agreements with a stranger who actually listened to her opinions, rather than dismissing her as just an assistant. The gala is for the Children's Education Initiative, Dominic continued. Cocktails, dinner, probably some speeches that'll make us both check our watches. But the company would be exceptional. Isabella glanced again at Nathan's office. He'd ended his call and was now reviewing contracts, his movements sharp and efficient. For 3 years, she'd watched him navigate the world of Seattle's elite, attending charity events and business dinners with the kind of women who appeared in society magazines. Polished, perfectly pedigreed, utterly forgettable. Women who looked at Isabella and saw nothing more than hired help. Isabella paused, surprised by her own hesitation. When was the last time someone had asked her out? When was the last time she'd worn something other than business attire? When was the last time she'd been anywhere that wasn't connected to Nathan Sterling's empire? Think about it, Dominic said, sensing her uncertainty. I'll text you the details. No pressure, Isabella, but I'd love to continue our conversation somewhere that doesn't involve conference coffee and name tags. After she hung up, Isabella stared at her phone, waiting for the familiar buzz of anxiety that came with stepping outside her carefully controlled routine. Instead, she felt something else entirely. Possibility. Isabella? Nathan's voice cut through her thoughts. He stood in his doorway, jacket slung over his arm, keys in hand. I'm heading to lunch with the Peterson Group. Can you push my 3 o'clock back an hour? Of course. She reached for her calendar, but her phone buzzed with a text from Dominic. Despite herself, she smiled as she read the gala details. Nathan's keys stilled in his hand. Good news? Isabella looked up, realizing she was still smiling. Oh, just a friend invited me to an event this weekend. Something shifted in Nathan's expression, so subtle that anyone else might have missed it. But Isabella had spent 3 years cataloging the micro-expressions that crossed Nathan Sterling's face. The slight tightening around his eyes. The almost imperceptible pause before he spoke. "That's nice." His voice was carefully neutral. "Anyone I know?" "Dominic Hayes from Meridian Ventures." Isabella watched as Nathan's grip tightened on his keys. "He's nice. Nice." The word hung between them like a challenge. Nathan's jaw clenched almost imperceptibly. "Hayes." Nathan seemed to be turning the name over in his mind. "He's competent enough, I suppose. Though I've heard he's quite the social butterfly." There was something in his tone. Not quite dismissal, but close enough to make Isabella's spine straighten. "He seemed very professional when we met." "I'm sure he did." Nathan's smile was sharp around the edges. "Just remember, these charity events can be networking opportunities. People aren't always what they seem." Isabella felt heat rise in her cheeks, but not the pleasant warmth from earlier. This was different, the kind of anger that comes from being underestimated by someone who should know better. "I think I can handle myself, Mr. Sterling." Nathan's expression softened immediately, as if he'd just realized what he'd implied. "Of course. I didn't mean, I just meant that Hayes is known for being quite charming. And you think I'd be susceptible to charm?" Isabella's voice was dangerously quiet. "No, that's not what I meant at all." Nathan ran a hand through his hair, destroying his usually perfect styling. Be careful. Be careful." As if she were a child. As if 3 years of managing his complex business relationships, handling sensitive negotiations, and navigating the shark-infested waters of Seattle's tech scene hadn't proven her capability. As if she couldn't recognize genuine interest from professional manipulation. "I'll keep that in mind," Isabella said coolly, turning back to her computer. "Have a good lunch, Mr. Sterling." Nathan hesitated at her desk, clearly wanting to say something more, but whatever words he was searching for remained locked behind his usual wall of professional distance. After he left, Isabella stared at Dominic's text message. The gala was this Saturday. Black tie. The Four Seasons. A world away from quarterly reports and conference calls, and the careful dance she and Nathan performed every day around feelings neither of them would acknowledge. She typed back quickly before she could change her mind. "I'd love to come. Thank you for thinking of me." The response came back almost immediately. "I haven't stopped thinking about you." Isabella's heart did something complicated in her chest. For 3 years she'd existed in Nathan Sterling's orbit, professional and efficient and completely invisible as a woman. But Dominic Hayes saw her, had been thinking about her, wanted to spend an evening listening to her thoughts on something other than meeting schedules and travel arrangements. She deserved that, didn't she? To be seen as more than just Nathan Sterling's brilliant assistant? As she updated Nathan's calendar, Isabella found herself humming, something she hadn't done in the office since, well, she couldn't remember when. But as she worked, she didn't notice the way Nathan watched her through his office window when he returned from lunch, his expression unreadable. He'd seen the smile on her face when she'd looked at her phone, the way her eyes had lit up when she'd mentioned Dominic Hayes. And for the first time in 3 years, Nathan Sterling realized that his perfect assistant might not always be there when he needed her. But he was about to discover just how much he'd taken for granted. She'd forgotten how it felt to shop for herself, until she remembered she had nothing to wear to be beautiful. Isabella stood in the middle of Nordstrom's evening wear section, surrounded by a sea of silk, satin, and sequins, feeling completely out of her depth. When was the last time she'd bought something that wasn't a tailored blazer or sensible heels? When was the last time she'd even thought about what made her feel beautiful instead of just professional? First charity gala? The sales associate, a woman about Isabella's age with kind eyes and an encouraging smile, appeared at her elbow. Her name tag read Cassandra. "Is it that obvious?" Isabella laughed, running her fingers along a midnight blue dress that probably cost more than her monthly rent. "Honey, I've seen that look 1,000 times. You're successful, you're smart, you probably run someone else's life better than they do, but you haven't bought a dress for yourself and—" Cassandra tilted her head, studying Isabella's perfectly pressed work attire. 3 years? 4, actually. The admission stung more than Isabella expected. "I've been focused on my career. And now?" Isabella thought about Dominic's voice on the phone, the way he'd remembered their conversation, the genuine interest in his eyes when they'd talked at the summit. "Now someone wants to take me somewhere beautiful." Cassandra's smile widened. "Well then, let's make sure you're unforgettable." An hour later, Isabella stood in front of a three-way mirror, barely recognizing herself. The emerald green dress Cassandra had chosen was perfect, elegant without being flashy, sophisticated without being severe. It hugged her curves in all the right places, and made her blonde hair look like spun gold. But more than that, it made her look like a woman who belonged at charity galas and high society events. It made her look like someone worth pursuing. "You're glowing," Cassandra said, adjusting the dress's delicate straps. "Whoever he is, he's lucky." Isabella's reflection smiled back at her, and for a moment, she forgot about quarterly reports and conference calls and the careful professional distance she maintained every day. She looked happy, alive, beautiful. Her phone buzzed. Nathan's name flashed on the screen. "Sorry, I should take this." Isabella stepped out of the dressing room, still wearing the dress. "Hi, Mr. Sterling." "Isabella, I need you to cancel my weekend plans. The Singapore deal needs immediate attention, and I'll need you here Saturday to—" "I can't." The words were out before Isabella could stop them. In 3 years, she'd never said those words to Nathan Sterling. She'd canceled dates, missed family dinners, worked through holidays. She'd made his schedule her priority, his crises her emergencies. The silence on the other end of the line stretched uncomfortably long. "I'm sorry, did you say you can't?" Nathan's voice was carefully controlled, but Isabella caught the underlying surprise. "I have plans Saturday evening. Remember? I mentioned the charity gala." Another pause. Isabella could practically hear Nathan's mind working, calculating, trying to find an angle that would make her change her mind without directly ordering her to do so. "This deal is worth $40 million, Isabella. Surely your social commitment can be rescheduled." Social commitment. The dismissive tone made Isabella's jaw clench. "I already confirmed my attendance. It would be unprofessional to cancel now." "Unprofessional?" Nathan's laugh was sharp. "And what about your professional commitment to Sterling Tech? To your job?" Isabella felt something cold settle in her stomach. "Are you threatening my job, Mr. Sterling?" "Of course not. I'm simply pointing out that priorities—" "My priority," Isabella interrupted, her voice steady despite the way her heart was pounding, "is to do my job exceptionally well Monday through Friday, 9 to 6, which I have, for 3 years, without fail." She could hear Nathan breathing on the other end of the line, could imagine him pacing behind his desk the way he did when a negotiation wasn't going his way. "Fine." The word was clipped. Final. "I'll handle the Singapore situation myself. Enjoy your gala." The line went dead. Isabella stared at her phone, feeling like she'd just jumped off a cliff. In 3 years of working for Nathan Sterling, they'd never had a conversation like that. Never. She'd seen him frustrated with board members, demanding with suppliers, coldly professional with competitors. But with her, there had always been an undercurrent of respect, of partnership. This felt different, personal. "Everything okay, honey?" Cassandra's voice was gentle. Isabella looked up to find the sales associate watching her with concern. "I think I just had my first fight with my boss." "About a dress? About boundaries?" Isabella smoothed the emerald silk, admiring the way it moved in the dressing room's soft lighting. "I think I've forgotten where mine are." Cassandra nodded knowingly. "Happens to the best of us, especially when we work for people who think they own our time. He's not usually like that. He's actually—" Isabella paused, trying to find the right words. "He's brilliant, demanding but fair. He's never made me feel like just an employee. But he's also never had to share my attention before." The realization hit Isabella like a physical blow. Nathan's reaction wasn't about the Singapore deal, not really. It was about Saturday night, about Dominic Hayes, about the fact that for the first time in 3 years, Isabella had chosen something, someone, over Nathan Sterling's needs. "Well," Cassandra said, zipping up the dress bag, "sounds like it's about time he learned to share." Isabella paid for the dress, along with shoes and a clutch that made her feel like a woman who belonged in 5-star hotels and charity galas. As she walked to her car, her phone buzzed with a text from Dominic. "Looking forward to Saturday night. I have a feeling it's going to be unforgettable." Isabella smiled, typing back quickly. "Me too." But as she drove back to her apartment, she couldn't shake the memory of Nathan's voice on the phone, surprised, almost hurt, when she'd said no to him for the first time. She'd built her entire professional identity around being indispensable to Nathan Sterling, around anticipating his needs and exceeding his expectations. What happened when she stopped being indispensable? When she had needs and expectations of her own? Saturday was 2 days away. 2 days to figure out if she was ready to be seen as more than Nathan Sterling's brilliant assistant. 2 days to discover if she remembered how to be just Isabella, but as she hung the emerald dress in her closet, Isabella realized she was more excited than nervous. For 3 years, she'd been perfect at her job, invisible as a woman. On Saturday night, she was going to be unforgettable, and Nathan Sterling was about to discover what he'd been taking for granted all along. She walked into that ballroom like she owned it, and he realized he'd been blind for 3 years. The Four Seasons ballroom glittered with the kind of understated elegance that only Seattle's elite could afford. Crystal chandeliers cast warm light over tables adorned with white orchids, while a string quartet played softly in the corner. Isabella paused at the entrance, her emerald dress catching the light like captured starfire, and for a moment she felt like she was stepping into someone else's life. "You look absolutely stunning." Isabella turned to find Dominic approaching, impeccable in his black tuxedo, his eyes warm with unmistakable appreciation, but more than that, with genuine pleasure at seeing her. "Thank you." Isabella accepted his offered arm, surprised by how natural it felt. "This is beautiful. The foundation really outdid themselves. Wait until you see the silent auction. There's a week in Tuscany that's calling my name." Dominic guided her toward the cocktail area, his hand light and respectful at the small of her back. "But first, champagne. And I want to hear about your week. Did your boss ever figure out that Singapore deal?" Isabella's smile faltered slightly. She hadn't told Dominic about her argument with Nathan, about the cold distance that had settled between them for the past 2 days. Nathan had been professionally polite, but nothing more. No shared glances, no subtle jokes, no moments of understanding that had defined their relationship for 3 years. "He managed," she said simply. "Nathan always does. Nathan Sterling, right? I've heard he's intense. That's one word for it." Isabella accepted a glass of champagne from a passing waiter, grateful for something to do with her hands. "He's brilliant, though. The kind of person who sees solutions where everyone else sees problems." Dominic studied her face with the kind of attention that made Isabella feel seen, understood. "You care about him." It wasn't a question, and Isabella felt heat rise in her cheeks. "He's my boss. I respect him professionally." "Of course." Dominic's smile was gentle, knowing. "But caring about someone and working for them aren't mutually exclusive. In fact, I'd argue it makes you better at your job." Before Isabella could respond, Dominic was guiding her toward a group of his colleagues, introducing her not as Nathan Sterling's assistant, but simply as Isabella Rodriguez, who has the most brilliant insights on international markets I've ever heard. For the next hour, Isabella found herself in conversations about economic policy, sustainable development, and the tech industry's responsibility to emerging markets. People listened to her opinions, asked follow-up questions, treated her thoughts as valuable rather than merely efficient. She was laughing at something Dominic had said about venture capital when she felt it, that familiar prickle at the back of her neck that meant someone was watching her. Isabella turned, scanning the crowd, and her breath caught. Nathan Sterling stood near the bar, devastating in his black tuxedo, his dark eyes fixed on her with an intensity that made her stomach flip. He wasn't supposed to be here. The Singapore deal was supposed to keep him busy all weekend. Their eyes met across the ballroom, and for a moment the elegant crowd, the soft music, Dominic's warm presence beside her, all of it faded away. There was only Nathan looking at her like he was seeing her for the first time, like he was seeing her as a woman. "Isabella, you okay?" Dominic's voice brought her back to the present. "Fine. I just saw someone I know." Isabella tore her gaze away from Nathan, focusing on Dominic's concerned face. "Sorry, you were saying?" But even as she tried to refocus on the conversation, Isabella was hyper-aware of Nathan's presence across the room. She could feel him watching her, could sense the tension radiating from him even at a distance. "Would you like to dance?" Dominic asked as the string quartet began a waltz. Isabella hesitated for just a moment, then nodded. "I'd love to." Dominic led her onto the dance floor, his hand warm and steady at her waist. He was a good dancer, confident but not showy, leading without being controlling. Isabella found herself relaxing into the rhythm, enjoying the simple pleasure of being held, of moving in harmony with someone who wanted nothing more than her company. "You're a wonderful dancer," Dominic murmured as he spun her gently. "Thank you. It's been a while since..." Isabella trailed off, realizing she couldn't remember the last time she danced with anyone. When had her life become so small, so focused on one person's needs that she'd forgotten her own? Since I did anything just for me," Isabella admitted. Dominic's expression softened. "Then I'm honored to be part of tonight." As the song ended, Isabella caught sight of Nathan again. He was standing alone now, his usual crowd of business associates notably absent. His jaw was tight, his hands clenched at his sides, and when their eyes met this time, Isabella saw something that made her breath catch. Pain. Raw, unguarded pain that Nathan Sterling never let anyone see. "Excuse me for just a moment," Isabella said to Dominic. "I need to—" "Of course, I'll get us more champagne." Isabella made her way across the ballroom, weaving between couples and clusters of conversation. Nathan watched her approach, his expression carefully neutral except for his eyes, those dark, expressive eyes that had never learned to lie. "Mr. Sterling." Isabella's voice was formal, professional. "I didn't expect to see you here tonight." The Singapore deal wrapped up early. His voice was equally controlled. "I thought I'd make an appearance for the foundation." They stood there in the middle of the elegant ballroom, surrounded by Seattle's elite, maintaining the careful distance that had defined their relationship for 3 years. But something was different now. The air between them felt charged, dangerous. "You look—" Nathan paused, his carefully constructed facade cracking slightly. "You look beautiful, Isabella." The words hung between them like a confession. Isabella felt her heart do something complicated in her chest, a flutter of hope and confusion and 3 years of carefully buried feelings threatening to surface. "Thank you," she managed. "Hayes seems attentive." Nathan's voice was carefully neutral, but Isabella caught the slight tightness around his eyes. "He's been very kind." "I'm sure he has." Nathan's jaw clenched almost imperceptibly. "Just remember what I said about networking events." The dismissive tone, the subtle implication that she couldn't handle herself, that Dominic's interest couldn't possibly be genuine. It hit Isabella like a slap. "I remember everything you said, Mr. Sterling." Isabella's voice was dangerously quiet, "including the part where you made it clear that my personal life is secondary to your professional needs." Nathan's expression shifted, surprise replacing careful control. "That's not what I meant." "Isn't it?" Isabella stepped closer, close enough to see the flecks of gold in his dark eyes, close enough to catch his familiar scent of expensive cologne, and something uniquely him. "For 3 years I've organized your life, managed your schedule, anticipated your needs. I've been perfect at my job, but I've never been anything more than that to you, have I?" "Isabella." "No." She held up a hand, stopping him. "Tonight, I'm not your assistant. Tonight I'm just a woman at a charity gala, wearing a beautiful dress dancing with a man who sees me as more than an employee. And you can't stand it, can you?" Nathan stared at her, his usual eloquence deserting him completely. Isabella had never spoken to him like this, had never challenged him so directly, so personally. Nathan started, then stopped, running a hand through his perfectly styled hair. "I don't know what you want me to say. I want you to be honest." Isabella's voice was soft now, vulnerable. "Just once I want you to tell me the truth." Nathan looked at her, really looked at her, standing there in her emerald dress with her blonde hair catching the chandelier light, her blue eyes bright with unshed tears and 3 years of unspoken questions. She was beautiful, yes, but more than that. She was brave. She was calling him out on every cowardly thing he'd never said, every feeling he'd buried beneath professional distance and emotional control. "The truth?" Nathan's voice was rough, barely above a whisper. "The truth is that watching you with him is the closest thing to hell I've ever experienced." Isabella's breath caught. "Nathan." "Isabella." Dominic's voice cut through the moment like a blade. He appeared at her elbow, champagne in hand, his expression warm and unknowing. "I was wondering where you'd disappeared to." The spell broke. Nathan stepped back, his professional mask sliding into place with practiced ease. Isabella blinked, trying to process what had just happened, what Nathan had just admitted. "Mr. Hayes." Nathan's voice was perfectly controlled again. "Enjoying the evening?" "Very much." Dominic's arm slipped around Isabella's waist, a gesture that was both possessive and protective. "Isabella was just telling me about your Singapore deal. Impressive work." Nathan's eyes flicked to where Dominic's hand rested on Isabella's hip, and Isabella saw his jaw tighten almost imperceptibly. "If you'll excuse me," Nathan said, his voice like ice. "I should be going." He turned and walked away, leaving Isabella staring after him, her heart pounding with everything unsaid, everything almost confessed. "You okay?" Dominic asked gently. "You look like you've seen a ghost." Isabella watched Nathan's retreating figure until he disappeared into the crowd, then turned back to Dominic with a smile that felt like it might crack her face. "I'm fine," she lied. "Shall we go back to dancing?" But as Dominic led her back onto the dance floor, Isabella's mind was spinning. Nathan's words echoed in her head. "Watching you with him is the closest thing to hell I've ever experienced." 3 years of professional distance, of careful boundaries, of unspoken feelings, had just exploded in the space of a 5-minute conversation, and tomorrow, they'd have to face each other across a desk and pretend it never happened. But some confessions can't be taken back, some words can't be unsaid, and some silences speak louder than any confession. Isabella stood outside the Sterling Tech building at 7:45 a.m., her usual 15 minutes early. But for the first time in 3 years, she didn't want to go inside. Her reflection in the glass doors showed a woman in a perfectly pressed navy suit, blonde hair pulled back in her signature chignon, every inch the professional executive assistant. But beneath the polished exterior, her heart was beating like a trapped bird. "Watching you with him is the closest thing to hell I've ever experienced." Nathan's words had echoed in her mind all night, turning over and over until she'd given up on sleep entirely. She'd replayed every moment of their conversation, every flicker of pain in his dark eyes, every crack in his carefully maintained facade. The elevator ride to the 42nd floor felt like ascending to her own execution. Isabella's hands were steady as she arranged Nathan's morning coffee. Black, no cream, no sugar, but her mind was chaos. How did you face someone who just confessed to 3 years of hidden feelings? How did you maintain professional distance with a man who'd looked at you like you were breaking his heart? Nathan's office door was closed when Isabella arrived at her desk, but she could see his silhouette through the frosted glass, already at work despite the early hour. He'd probably been there all night, burying himself in contracts and quarterly reports the way he always did when emotions threatened his carefully controlled world. Isabella set his coffee on her desk and stared at it, paralyzed by indecision. For 3 years, she'd walked into that office without hesitation, bringing him his morning coffee and the day's priorities. It had been routine, comfortable, the foundation of their professional relationship. Everything felt different now. Her computer chimed with an email from Nathan, sent at 6:23 a.m. "Isabella, please reschedule my 10 a.m. with the Morrison Group. I'll be working from home today. N. Sterling." Isabella stared at the message, her heart sinking. Nathan never worked from home. Never. In 3 years, he'd come to the office with the flu during snowstorms, on holidays when he should have been with his family. Sterling Tech was his sanctuary, his kingdom, the place where he had complete control. He was avoiding her. Another email appeared in her inbox, this one from Dominic. "Isabella, thank you for a wonderful evening. You were absolutely radiant, and I can't stop thinking about our conversation about sustainable development in Southeast Asia. Would you like to continue it over dinner Friday night? I know a quiet little Italian place in Capitol Hill that serves the best osso buco in Seattle. Yours, Dominic." Isabella should have felt pleased. Dominic was charming, successful, interested in her thoughts and opinions. He saw her as more than just Nathan Sterling's assistant, treated her like a woman worth pursuing. This was what she'd wanted, wasn't it? To be valued for more than her professional competence. So why did the invitation feel like consolation prize? "You're here early." Isabella looked up to find Vivian Chen, Nathan's director of operations, approaching with her usual Monday morning latte. Vivian was one of the few people at Sterling Tech who'd ever bothered to get to know Isabella beyond her role as Nathan's gatekeeper. "Same time as always," Isabella replied, closing Dominic's email quickly. Vivian perched on the edge of Isabella's desk, her sharp eyes taking in the untouched coffee cup, the closed office door, the subtle tension in Isabella's shoulders. "And how was the charity gala Saturday night? You looked stunning, by the way. I saw the photos on the Foundation's Instagram." Isabella's cheeks warmed. She'd forgotten about the photographer who'd been circulating the room, capturing candid moments for the Foundation's social media. Had Nathan seen those photos? Had he seen her laughing with Dominic, dancing, looking happier than she had in months? "It was lovely," Isabella said carefully. "The Foundation raised a lot of money for the education initiative. And Dominic Hayes? He seemed quite taken with you." Vivian's smile was knowing. It's about time someone appreciated what Nathan's been too blind to see. Isabella's coffee cup rattled against her desk as she set it down too quickly. "I don't know what you mean." "Isabella." Vivian's voice was gentle but firm. "I've been watching this dance between you two for 3 years. You're both brilliant at hiding it from yourselves, but the rest of us aren't blind. There's nothing to hide. Nathan is my boss. We have a professional relationship. Professional? Vivian laughed softly. Is that what we're calling the way he looks at you when he thinks no one's watching? Or the way you light up when he actually notices something you've done that goes beyond your job description? Isabella's throat felt tight. Even if that were true, it doesn't matter. Nathan made his feelings clear this weekend. Did he? Vivian's eyebrows rose. Because from what I heard, Nathan Sterling showed up at a charity gala he had no business attending, watched you dance with another man, and left without speaking to anyone else. That doesn't sound like indifference to me. Before Isabella could respond, Nathan's office door opened. He stepped out, impeccable as always in a charcoal gray suit. But Isabella caught the subtle signs of a sleepless night, the slight tightness around his eyes, the barely perceptible wrinkle in his usually perfect shirt. Their eyes met for exactly 2.1 seconds. She was still timing these moments, apparently, before Nathan's gaze shifted to Vivian. Vivian, I didn't expect to see you here so early. Monday morning strategy session with the team. Vivian slid off Isabella's desk with practiced ease. Speaking of which, I should get going. Have a good day, you two. She walked away with a meaningful glance at Isabella, leaving them alone in the suddenly too quiet hallway. Your coffee? Isabella said, reaching for the cup she'd prepared. I don't need it. Nathan's voice was carefully neutral. I'm heading home to work on the Chen Industries proposal. Of course. I'll reschedule your meetings. I already sent you the details. They stood there, two people who had worked together seamlessly for 3 years, suddenly unable to navigate the simplest interaction. The air between them felt charged with everything unsaid, every feeling they'd spent years burying beneath professional courtesy. Nathan, Isabella started. I should go. Nathan was already moving toward the elevator, his retreat swift and decisive. Forward anything urgent to my personal phone. Isabella watched him leave, feeling like she was losing something she'd never even had. For 3 years, they'd existed in perfect professional harmony, understanding each other's rhythms, anticipating each other's needs. Now they couldn't even manage a 5-minute conversation about coffee and meetings. Her phone buzzed. A text from Dominic. Did you get my email about Friday? I'm hoping you'll say yes. Last night was just the beginning. Isabella stared at the message, her thumb hovering over the keyboard. Dominic was offering her everything she thought she wanted. Attention, romance, a chance to be seen as more than just an assistant. He was safe, available, interested. He wasn't Nathan Sterling. But Nathan Sterling had just made it clear that whatever had passed between them at the gala was a mistake, a moment of weakness he had no intention of repeating. He was protecting their professional relationship, maintaining the boundaries that kept Sterling Tech running smoothly. He was doing exactly what Isabella had always respected about him, putting business first. So why did it feel like rejection? Isabella typed back quickly before she could change her mind. I'd love to have dinner Friday. Italian sounds perfect. The response came back immediately. Can't wait. You won't regret this, Isabella. But as Isabella settled into her Monday morning routine, rescheduling meetings, fielding calls, managing the complex machinery of Nathan Sterling's professional life, she couldn't shake the feeling that she already did. The office felt different without Nathan's presence, too quiet, too empty. For 3 years, she'd organized her entire world around his schedule, his needs, his carefully controlled chaos. Without him there, she felt untethered, purposeless. At noon, she ordered her usual salad from the cafe downstairs and ate it at her desk, staring at Nathan's empty office. Her phone rang, the Seattle Times, looking for a quote about Sterling Tech's expansion into renewable energy. She handled it with her usual efficiency, speaking for Nathan with the authority he'd given her over the years. But even as she managed his world from a distance, Isabella couldn't stop thinking about the way he'd looked at her at the gala, like she was something precious he was afraid to touch, like she was everything he wanted and nothing he could have, like she was breaking his heart just by existing. As the afternoon wore on, Isabella found herself glancing at her phone, waiting for Nathan to call with questions about the Morrison Group meeting, or the Chen Industries proposal, or any of the dozen things he usually needed her input on. The silence stretched until 5:47 p.m., when Isabella's computer chimed with another email from Nathan. Isabella, thank you for handling the Times inquiry. I'll be working from home for the rest of the week. Please manage my schedule accordingly. N. Sterling. Isabella stared at the message until the words blurred. Nathan Sterling, who had never missed a day of work in 3 years, was avoiding the office. Avoiding her. She was losing him, piece by careful piece. and she didn't know how to stop it. But some battles are worth fighting for. When silence becomes louder than words, someone has to make the first move. By Thursday, Isabella felt like she was managing a ghost. Nathan had been working from home for 4 days, communicating only through terse emails and brief phone calls that felt more like business transactions than conversations. The man who had once trusted her with his most sensitive negotiations, who had valued her insights on everything from market analysis to his mother's birthday gifts, now treated her like a stranger. Isabella sat at her desk at 6:30 p.m., the office empty, except for the cleaning crew and the soft hum of fluorescent lights. Her computer screen showed Nathan's calendar for the following week, meetings she'd rescheduled, calls she'd fielded, appointments she'd managed without any input from the man whose life she was supposed to be organizing. She was doing her job perfectly, and it was killing her. Her phone buzzed with a text from Dominic. "Looking forward to tomorrow night. I made reservations at Cafe Juanita for 7 p.m. Can't wait to see you again. Tomorrow, Friday." Her dinner date with Dominic, kind, charming, available Dominic, who saw her as more than just an extension of Nathan Sterling's professional life. She should be excited. She should be looking forward to an evening of intelligent conversation and genuine attention from a man who appreciated her. Instead, she felt empty. Isabella's reflection stared back at her from her darkened computer screen. Blonde hair perfectly styled, makeup flawless despite the long day, every inch the competent executive assistant. But her eyes looked hollow, tired in a way that had nothing to do with work and everything to do with the careful distance Nathan had constructed between them. The elevator dinged, breaking the office silence. Isabella looked up, expecting to see the night security guard making his rounds. Instead, Nathan Sterling stepped into the hallway, looking as surprised to see her as she was to see him. "Isabella." His voice was carefully neutral, but she caught the slight hitch when he said her name. "I didn't expect anyone to still be here. I was just finishing up the Morrison Group contracts." Isabella's voice sounded too loud in the quiet office. "I thought you were working from home this week. I needed some files from my office." Nathan's explanation sounded rehearsed, hollow. They both knew he could have accessed any file remotely. Sterling Tech's IT infrastructure was too sophisticated for such a basic limitation. He was here because he missed this place, missed his routine, missed her. Nathan moved toward his office, his movements stiff and unnatural. Isabella watched him fumble with his keycard. Nathan Sterling, who never fumbled with anything, and felt something break inside her chest. "Nathan, stop." The words were out before Isabella could censor them. Nathan froze, his hand still on his office door handle. "We can't keep doing this," Isabella continued, standing up from her desk. "This distance, whatever this is, it's destroying everything we've built." Nathan's shoulders tensed. "I don't know what you mean. Our professional relationship remains intact." "Professional relationship?" Isabella's laugh was sharp, bitter. "Is that what you call not speaking to me for 4 days? Is that what you call avoiding your own office because you can't stand to be in the same room with me?" Nathan turned around slowly, his dark eyes unreadable. "I thought distance would be appropriate after Saturday night." "Appropriate?" Isabella stepped closer, her heels clicking against the polished floor. "You told me that watching me with Dominic was hell for you. You looked at me like I was breaking your heart. And now you think appropriate distance is the solution?" "It is." Nathan's voice was firm, but Isabella caught the tremor underneath. What happened at the gala was unprofessional, a mistake. The word hit Isabella like a physical blow. Mistake. 3 years of careful partnership, of unspoken understanding, of moments that had felt like the most honest thing in her life, reduced to a mistake. "A mistake," Isabella repeated quietly. "Is that what you call finally telling the truth?" Nathan ran a hand through his hair, destroying his perfect styling. "Isabella, you don't understand. Then explain it to me." Isabella was close enough now to see the exhaustion in his eyes, the way his hands shook slightly when he thought she wasn't looking. "Explain to me why admitting you have feelings is such a catastrophe. Explain to me why you'd rather destroy 3 years of partnership than acknowledge what's been between us." "Because I can't lose you." The words exploded out of Nathan like they'd been trapped under pressure for years. "Because if I tell you how I really feel, if I cross that line, and it doesn't work, I lose the best thing in my life. I lose my partner, my confidant, the one person who actually sees me. I lose everything." Isabella stared at him, her heart pounding. "So instead you're losing me anyway. Slowly, piece by piece, death by 1,000 professional courtesies. Nathan's facade crumbled completely. He leaned back against his office door, suddenly looking older than his 35 years. I don't know how to do this, Isabella. I don't know how to risk everything on the chance that what I feel, that what we might have, is worth destroying what we do have. And what do we have, Nathan? Isabella's voice was soft now, vulnerable. What exactly are you so afraid of losing? Nathan looked at her, really looked at her, standing there in the empty office in her navy suit with her blonde hair catching the overhead lights, her blue eyes bright with unshed tears, and 3 years of unspoken questions. She was beautiful, yes, but more than that. She was brave enough to fight for something he was too terrified to reach for. You, he said simply. I'm afraid of losing you. Then stop pushing me away. Isabella took another step closer, close enough to touch him if she dared. I'm not going anywhere, Nathan. Not unless you make me. Aren't you? Nathan's smile was sad, knowing. You have dinner tomorrow night with Hayes, a man who can offer you everything I can't. A normal relationship, a future without complications, someone who isn't your boss. Isabella felt heat rise in her cheeks. Of course, Nathan knew about her date with Dominic. He knew everything that happened in her life, just as she knew everything in his. It was part of their careful dance, part of the professional intimacy that had defined their relationship for 3 years. Dominic is... Isabella paused, searching for the right words. He's a good man. He sees me as more than just an assistant. And what do I see you as? Nathan's voice was rough, barely above a whisper. The question hung between them like a challenge. Isabella looked into Nathan's dark eyes and saw everything he'd never said. 3 years of admiration, respect, need, and something deeper that neither of them had been brave enough to name. I don't know, Isabella admitted. That's the problem, isn't it? I've never known where I stand with you. Professional partner, valued employee, something more. For 3 years I've existed in this gray area between business and personal, never knowing which version of myself you actually need. Nathan stepped closer, close enough that Isabella could see the flecks of gold in his dark eyes, could catch his familiar scent of expensive cologne and something uniquely him. You want to know what I see when I look at you? Nathan's voice was intense, focused. I see the woman who reorganized my entire filing system in her first week because she couldn't stand inefficiency. I see the person who talks me down from bad decisions and celebrates the good ones. I see someone who knows when I need coffee and when I need silence, who can read my moods better than I can. Isabella's breath caught as Nathan continued, his voice growing softer, more vulnerable. I see the woman who wore an emerald dress to a charity gala and outshone everyone in the room, who danced with another man and looked so happy it nearly killed me, who's brave enough to fight for what she wants while I hide behind professional distance and corporate hierarchy. Nathan, I see everything, Isabella. That's the problem. I see too much, feel too much, need too much. And I don't know how to separate Nathan the boss from Nathan the man who's been falling in love with his assistant for 3 years. The confession hung in the air between them like a live wire. Isabella felt her world tilt. Everything she thought she knew about their relationship shifting into a new configuration. Falling in love, she repeated quietly. Nathan's laugh was self-deprecating, painful. Pathetic, isn't it? The great Nathan Sterling brought low by his own employee. The board would have a field day. Stop. Isabella's voice was fierce. Don't you dare diminish this. Don't you dare make what we feel about corporate policies and board meetings. Then what is it about? Nathan asked, his dark eyes searching her face. Because I can't see a way forward that doesn't destroy everything we've built. Isabella looked at him, this brilliant, complicated man who had been the center of her professional world for 3 years, who had just confessed to loving her while simultaneously pushing her toward another man. Nathan Sterling, who could negotiate billion-dollar deals but couldn't navigate his own heart? Maybe, Isabella said slowly. Some things are worth the risk of destruction. Nathan stared at her, hope and terror warring in his expression. And if we're wrong? If we try this and it falls apart? Then we'll face that together too. Isabella reached out, her fingers brushing against his hand. But Nathan, what if we're right? The touch sent electricity up Isabella's arm, and she saw Nathan's pupils dilate in response. For a moment, 3 years of professional distance crumbled, leaving only a man and a woman who had been dancing around their feelings for far too long. Then Nathan's phone rang, shattering the moment like glass. Nathan glanced at the screen, his expression shifting back to business mode. It's the Singapore office, I have to... Take it, Isabella said, stepping back, the professional mask sliding into place with practiced ease. I should get going anyway. Nathan hesitated, the phone still ringing in his hand. Isabella, we'll figure this out, Isabella said, gathering her purse and jacket. But not tonight. Tonight we both need to think about what we actually want. As Isabella walked toward the elevator, she could hear Nathan answering his phone, his voice shifting back to the controlled, professional tone she knew so well. But she could also feel his eyes on her, could sense the weight of everything they'd just confessed hanging between them like a promise. Tomorrow night she had dinner with Dominic Hayes, charming, available, uncomplicated Dominic, who offered her everything she thought she wanted. But standing in that elevator, watching the floors count down, Isabella realized she already knew what she wanted. The question was whether she was brave enough to fight for it. Sometimes the heart knows what the mind refuses to accept, until there's no choice left but honesty. Isabella stood in front of her bedroom mirror, staring at her reflection in the little black dress she'd chosen for dinner with Dominic. The woman looking back at her was polished, elegant, ready for a perfect evening with a perfect man who offered her everything she'd thought she wanted. So why did she feel like she was preparing for her own funeral? Nathan's words from the night before echoed in her mind. I've been falling in love with my assistant for 3 years. The confession had shattered every assumption she'd made about their relationship, every careful boundary she'd constructed to protect herself from hoping for something impossible. Her phone buzzed. A text from Dominic. On my way to pick you up. You're about to have the best osso buco of your life. Isabella forced a smile, typing back, looking forward to it. But as she gathered her purse and jacket, her eyes landed on the framed photo on her dresser, a candid shot from last year's company retreat. Nathan was laughing at something she'd said, his usual guarded expression replaced by genuine joy, while Isabella beamed beside him, looking more alive than she had in any photo before or since. They looked like a couple. They looked happy. They looked like they belonged together. The drive to Café Juanita passed in a blur of Seattle streets and nervous energy. Dominic was charming as always, asking about her week, complimenting her dress, making easy conversation that should have put her at ease. Instead, Isabella found herself comparing everything to Nathan. The way Dominic's laugh was too polished compared to Nathan's rare, genuine chuckles. How his cologne was pleasant but forgettable next to Nathan's distinctive scent that made her pulse quicken. You're quiet tonight, Dominic observed as they were seated at an intimate corner table. Everything okay? Just tired, Isabella lied, accepting the menu from their server. It's been a busy week. Ah, yes, the demanding Mr. Sterling. Dominic's tone was light, but Isabella caught something underneath, a note of dismissal that made her spine straighten. I imagine working for someone so intense can be exhausting. Isabella looked up from her menu, studying Dominic's handsome face. Nathan isn't just demanding, he's brilliant. The work we do together is challenging, but it's also... She paused, searching for the right word, and realized with startling clarity what it was. Fulfilling, she finished. It's fulfilling. Dominic nodded, but his smile seemed forced. Of course. Though I have to say, watching you at the gala last weekend, you seemed so much more yourself, relaxed, like you could finally breathe. I was having a nice time, Isabella said carefully, because you weren't working, because you weren't in Nathan Sterling's shadow. Dominic leaned forward, his voice earnest. Isabella, you're brilliant, beautiful, capable of so much more than organizing someone else's life. You could have your own company, your own success. You don't have to exist in service to someone else's vision. The words hit Isabella like cold water. Is that what you think I do? Exist in service? Don't you? Dominic's question was gentle but pointed. When was the last time you made a decision based on what you wanted, not what Nathan Sterling needed? Isabella opened her mouth to respond, then closed it again. The question was fair, even if she didn't like hearing it. For 3 years, she had organized her life around Nathan's schedule, his needs, his crises. She'd canceled dates, missed family events, rearranged her entire existence to accommodate his professional demands. But it hadn't felt like sacrifice. It had felt like partnership. You're right, Isabella said slowly. I have built my life around Nathan's needs, but not because I'm weak or subservient, because we work well together, because what we've created is bigger than either of us alone. But what about what you want? Dominic pressed. What about your dreams, your ambitions? What about love? Love. The word hung between them like a challenge. Isabella looked at Dominic, handsome, successful, available Dominic, who was offering her a relationship uncomplicated by professional boundaries or power dynamics. Who saw her potential and wanted to help her achieve it? Who could give her the normal, healthy romance she'd convinced herself she wanted? "I care about you, Isabella," Dominic continued, reaching across the table to cover her hand with his. "More than I probably should after just 2 meetings. But I can see what you can't, that you're wasting your life on someone who will never see you as anything more than an employee." Isabella's hand stiffened under his touch. "You don't know Nathan. I know enough." Dominic's voice was gentle but firm. "I know he's never asked you out, never acknowledged what's obviously between you, never fought for you the way a man fights for the woman he loves." The words stung because they held a grain of truth. Nathan had never pursued her, never crossed the professional line, never given her any indication that she was more to him than his exceptionally competent assistant. Until last night. "I've been falling in love with my assistant for 3 years." "Isabella?" Dominic's voice brought her back to the present. "You're somewhere else entirely." "I'm sorry." Isabella pulled her hand free, reaching for her water glass with fingers that weren't quite steady. It's been a complicated week." "Because of him." It wasn't a question. Isabella looked at Dominic, really looked at him. He was everything any rational woman would want. Kind, successful, emotionally available, free of complications. He was offering her a future without the messy tangle of professional and personal that defined her relationship with Nathan. He was safe, and safety, Isabella realized with crystal clarity, was the last thing she wanted. "Dominic," Isabella said softly, "you're a wonderful man. Any woman would be lucky to have your attention." Dominic's expression shifted, recognizing the tone of a gentle rejection. "But not you." "Not me," Isabella confirmed. "I'm sorry. I thought I wanted to want this, want you, but I can't stop thinking about someone else." "Nathan Sterling." Dominic's voice was resigned, but not bitter. "Nathan Sterling," Isabella agreed. Dominic leaned back in his chair, studying her face with the kind of attention that made her feel exposed. "You're in love with him." It wasn't a question, but Isabella answered anyway. "Yes, I am." The admission felt like stepping off a cliff. For 3 years, Isabella had buried her feelings beneath professional competence and careful distance. She'd told herself that what she felt was admiration, respect, the natural result of working closely with someone brilliant. She'd convinced herself that the flutter in her chest when Nathan smiled was just professional satisfaction, that the way her heart raced when he stood too close was merely the effect of proximity to power. She'd been lying to herself for 3 years. "Does he know?" Dominic asked. "He knows." Isabella's voice was barely above a whisper. "As of last night, he knows." "And?" Isabella laughed, the sound hollow in the elegant restaurant. "And nothing. We're both terrified of what it means, what it could cost us. So we're dancing around it like it's a live bomb that might explode if we handle it wrong. Maybe it will explode," Dominic said gently. "Maybe trying to turn a professional relationship into something personal will destroy everything you've built together. Maybe." Isabella met his eyes, seeing kindness there despite his disappointment. "But Dominic, what if it doesn't? What if it's the best thing that could happen to us?" Dominic was quiet for a long moment, studying her face. Finally, he smiled. Sad, but genuine. "You're glowing when you talk about him. Even when you're scared, even when you're confused, you light up. That's not something you can fake or force or rationalize your way into." Isabella felt tears prick at her eyes. "I'm sorry. You deserve someone who lights up when she talks about you." "I do," Dominic agreed without rancor. "And you deserve someone who fights for you. The question is Nathan Sterling brave enough to do that?" Isabella thought about Nathan's confession the night before, the vulnerability in his dark eyes, the way his voice had broken when he'd admitted to falling in love with her. She thought about 3 years of careful partnership, of unspoken understanding, of moments that had felt like the most honest thing in her life. "I don't know," Isabella said honestly, "but I think I need to find out." Dominic signaled for the check, his movements graceful despite the disappointment that must have been crushing him. "Then you should probably go find out now, before you lose your nerve." "Now?" Isabella blinked. "But dinner." "Isabella." Dominic's voice was gentle but firm. "You've been somewhere else all evening. Your body is here, but your heart is with him. Don't waste any more time pretending otherwise." 20 minutes later, Isabella stood on the sidewalk outside Cafe Juanita, her phone in her hand, trying to gather the courage to do something that would change everything. Dominic had kissed her cheek before getting into his car, wishing her luck with a generosity that made her chest ache with guilt and gratitude. Now she was alone with her choice. She could go home, pretend the conversation with Dominic hadn't happened, show up at work Monday morning and slip back into the comfortable routine of professional distance and unspoken longing. She could protect what they had by never risking it for what they might become, or she could fight for something real. Isabella's fingers moved across her phone screen before her rational mind could stop them. Typing a text to Nathan. "Are you home? I need to see you. Tonight." The response came back almost immediately. "Yes, are you okay?" Isabella stared at the message, her heart pounding with terrifying certainty. She wasn't okay. She hadn't been okay for 3 years, dancing around her feelings, convincing herself that professional partnership was enough, that she could be satisfied with half measures and careful distances. She typed back, "I'm on my way." As Isabella hailed a taxi, she felt something shift inside her chest, fear giving way to determination, doubt dissolving into clarity. For 3 years, she'd been Nathan Sterling's perfect assistant, anticipating his needs, managing his world, existing in the careful space he'd defined for her. Tonight, she was going to find out if Nathan Sterling was brave enough to step into hers, because some risks were worth everything. When all the walls come down, there's nowhere left to hide. Nathan's penthouse apartment overlooked Elliott Bay, its floor-to-ceiling windows offering a breathtaking view of Seattle's glittering skyline. But as Isabella stood in his marble foyer at 9:30 p.m., still wearing her black dress from dinner with Dominic, she wasn't looking at the view. She was looking at Nathan Sterling, barefoot, in jeans and a white button-down shirt with the sleeves rolled up, his usually perfect hair mussed as if he'd been running his hands through it. He looked human, vulnerable, beautiful. "Isabella." Nathan's voice was rough with surprise and something else. Relief. "I thought you were at dinner with Hayes." "I was." Isabella's heart was beating so hard she was sure Nathan could hear it in the quiet space between them. "I left." Nathan's dark eyes searched her face, taking in her flushed cheeks, the way her hands trembled slightly as she clutched her purse. "Are you okay? Did something happen?" "Yes." Isabella stepped further into his apartment, past the careful distance they always maintained, past the professional boundaries that had defined their relationship for 3 years. "Something happened. I realized I was in the wrong place with the wrong person." Nathan went very still. "Isabella, I told Dominic I was in love with someone else." The words came out in a rush, 3 years of buried feelings finally breaking free. "I told him I was in love with you." The silence that followed was deafening. Nathan stared at her, his expression cycling through surprise, hope, and fear so quickly Isabella could barely track the changes. His hands clenched and unclenched at his sides, and she could see him struggling with the same battle between professional caution and personal desire that had been tearing them both apart. "You told him that," Nathan said finally, his voice carefully controlled. "I told him that." Isabella took another step closer, close enough to see the gold flecks in Nathan's dark eyes, close enough to catch his familiar scent. "And then I came here to tell you the same thing, because I'm tired of pretending, Nathan. I'm tired of dancing around what we both know is true." Nathan ran a hand through his hair, pacing to his floor-to-ceiling windows and staring out at the city lights. "Isabella, you don't understand what you're asking, what this would mean. Then explain it to me." Isabella followed him, her heels clicking against the hardwood floor. "Explain to me why admitting we love each other is such a catastrophe." Nathan whirled around, his carefully maintained composure finally cracking. "Because I'm your boss. Because there are rules, regulations, HR policies that exist for good reasons. Because if this goes wrong, you could lose your job, your career, your reputation. Because I have more power than you do, and that makes everything between us complicated." "And what if it goes right?" Isabella challenged. "What if we're brave enough to fight for something real instead of hiding behind corporate policies and professional distance?" Nathan's laugh was harsh, self-deprecating. "You think I haven't thought about that? You think I haven't lain awake nights imagining what it would be like to hold you, to kiss you, to not have to pretend that you're just my assistant when you're so much more than that?" Isabella's breath caught. "Then why are you fighting this?" "Because I'm terrified." Nathan's voice broke on the words. "Because you're the best thing in my life, Isabella. You're my partner, my confidant, the person who makes me better at everything I do. And if I tell you how I really feel, if we cross this line and it destroys us, I don't know how I'd survive losing you." Isabella stared at him, this brilliant, powerful man who commanded boardrooms and closed billion-dollar deals, reduced to raw vulnerability by the simple prospect of loving her. "Nathan, look at me." He turned, his dark eyes bright with unshed tears and 3 years of carefully buried longing. "You're not going to lose me," Isabella said softly. "You're going to lose me if you keep pushing me away. If you keep treating what we feel like it's a business problem to be managed instead of something beautiful to be cherished." Nathan stepped closer, close enough that Isabella could see the pulse beating rapidly at his throat, could feel the heat radiating from his body. "And if the board finds out? If there's a scandal? If your career gets destroyed because you took a chance on someone like me? Someone like you?" Isabella's voice was fierce. "Nathan Sterling, you are the most honorable man I know. You've never made me feel like anything less than an equal partner. You've supported my ideas, valued my input, treated me with more respect than any boss I've ever had. If loving you destroys my career, then it wasn't a career worth having." Nathan's control finally shattered completely. "God, Isabella, do you have any idea what you do to me? How hard it's been to keep my hands to myself, to pretend I don't notice the way you bite your lip when you're concentrating, or how your eyes light up when you solve a problem, or how beautiful you look first thing in the morning when you think no one's watching." Isabella's heart soared, then stopped pretending. Nathan reached for her, his hands cupping her face with a tenderness that made her knees weak. "If we do this, there's no going back. Everything changes." "Everything's already changed," Isabella whispered, covering his hands with hers. "The only question is whether we're brave enough to admit it." Nathan stared into her eyes for a long moment, and Isabella could see the exact moment his fear transformed into determination. "I love you," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "I've been in love with you for 3 years, and I'm tired of pretending I'm not." "I love you too," Isabella breathed. "So much that it scares me." Nathan's thumb traced her cheekbone, his touch gentle despite the intensity in his eyes. "Then we'll be scared together." When Nathan finally kissed her, it was nothing like the polite professional interactions that had defined their relationship for 3 years. This was desperate, passionate, 3 years of buried longing finally set free. Isabella's arms wound around his neck as he pulled her closer, and she felt like she was finally coming home after a long journey. When they broke apart, both breathing hard, Nathan rested his forehead against hers. "What happens now?" Isabella smiled, her hands tangling in his hair. "Now we figure it out together, like we always do. The board will adapt," Isabella said firmly. "We're both adults, Nathan. We're both professionals. We'll handle whatever comes next." Nathan pulled back slightly, studying her face with wonder. "How are you so calm about this? 3 hours ago you were at dinner with another man." Isabella's cheeks warmed. 3 hours ago I was lying to myself about what I wanted. But sitting across from Dominic, listening to him talk about how I deserved better than existing in your shadow, I realized something." "What?" "I don't exist in your shadow," Isabella said, her voice strong and sure. "I exist beside you. As your equal, your partner, your match. And that's exactly where I want to be." Nathan's smile was brilliant, transforming his entire face. "My match. Your match," Isabella confirmed, rising on her toes to kiss him again. This time, Nathan lifted her off her feet, spinning her around his living room as they laughed against each other's lips. When he set her down, they were both grinning like teenagers, giddy with relief and joy, and the simple pleasure of finally being honest. "So," Nathan said, his arms still around her waist, "how do we do this? How do we go from boss and assistant to whatever this is?" Isabella considered the question seriously. "Carefully, honestly. We'll need to talk to HR. Probably restructure our working relationship. Maybe I should report to Vivian instead of directly to you." Nathan's expression darkened. "I don't want you reporting to anyone else." "Nathan," Isabella's voice was gentle but firm, "if we're going to do this right, we need to be above reproach. No one can say you gave me special treatment because we're involved. You've earned every opportunity I've given you," Nathan said fiercely. "Your promotion to senior associate last year, your salary increases, your involvement in the Singapore deal, all of that was based on merit. I know that. You know that. But we need to make sure everyone else knows it too." Isabella reached up to smooth his furrowed brow. "We'll figure it out, Nathan. Together." Nathan caught her hand, pressing a kiss to her palm. Together. They stood there in Nathan's apartment, holding each other as the Seattle skyline glittered beyond the windows, and Isabella felt something she hadn't experienced in 3 years. Complete peace. No more careful distances. No more professional masks. No more pretending that what they felt was anything less than earth-shattering love. "Isabella?" Nathan's voice was soft, wondering. Yes, thank you for being brave enough to come here tonight. For fighting for us when I was too scared to fight for myself. Isabella smiled, her heart full to bursting. Someone very wise once told me that some things are worth the risk of destruction. Nathan's eyebrows rose. Someone very wise? A billionaire I know, Isabella said, her eyes dancing with mischief. Turns out he was right. Nathan threw back his head and laughed. The genuine, unguarded sound Isabella had fallen in love with years ago. When he looked at her again, his eyes were bright with joy and something deeper, something that looked like forever. I love you, Isabella Rodriguez, he said, his voice full of wonder. I love you too, Nathan Sterling, Isabella replied. And for the first time in 3 years, neither of them looked away, because some loves are worth fighting for. Monday mornings had never felt like Christmas before, until everything changed. Isabella woke up in Nathan's arms as Seattle's pale morning light filtered through his bedroom windows. For a moment, she lay perfectly still, afraid that moving would shatter the dream. Because surely this had to be a dream. Surely she wasn't really here, in Nathan Sterling's bed, wearing his Stanford t-shirt, with his arm wrapped protectively around her waist. But the steady rhythm of his breathing against her neck, the familiar scent of his cologne mixed with something deeper and more intimate, the way his fingers were unconsciously tracing patterns on her hip, all of it was gloriously, impossibly real. Good morning. Nathan's voice was husky with sleep, sending shivers down Isabella's spine. She turned in his arms, finding him watching her with an expression of wonder that made her heart skip. His dark hair was mussed from sleep, his jaw shadowed with stubble, and he looked younger somehow, softer around the edges, like the careful armor he wore in the business world had been set aside for something more precious. Good morning, Isabella whispered back, still hardly believing this was real. How long have you been awake? About an hour. Nathan's thumb traced her cheekbone with reverent gentleness. I kept thinking I was going to wake up and find out this was all an elaborate dream, that you'd be back at your desk Monday morning calling me Mr. Sterling and pretending Friday night never happened. Isabella's smile was brilliant, radiant. No more Mr. Sterling, no more pretending. She pressed a soft kiss to his lips, marveling at how natural it felt, how right. Though we should probably talk about Monday morning before it actually arrives. Nathan groaned, burying his face in her neck. Do we have to think about reality yet? Can't we just stay here and pretend the rest of the world doesn't exist? Tempting, Isabella laughed, her fingers threading through his hair. But we both know you'll start getting twitchy about the Tokyo markets opening in about 20 minutes. Nathan pulled back to look at her, his expression shifting from sleepy contentment to amazement. How do you do that? How do you know me so well? 3 years of practice, Isabella said softly. Nathan, that doesn't change just because we're this now. I still know when you need coffee, when you're stressed about a deal, when you're avoiding your mother's calls. And I still know that you bite your lip when you're nervous, that you hum when you're happy, and that you're probably already planning exactly how we're going to navigate the office politics of our situation, Nathan said, his eyes crinkling with affection. Isabella felt heat rise in her cheeks because he was absolutely right. Part of her mind was already running through scenarios, potential complications, strategies for maintaining their professional credibility while exploring this new personal territory. We need to be smart about this, Isabella said, settling more comfortably against his chest. Transparent but professional. We should probably start by scheduling a meeting with Vivian and the HR department. Nathan's arm tightened around her. I don't want other people defining what we can be to each other. They won't, Isabella said firmly. But we need to show that we're handling this responsibly, that our personal relationship won't compromise our professional judgment. Nathan was quiet for a moment, his fingers tracing abstract patterns on her bare shoulder. What if they suggest you transfer to another department? What if they decide we can't work together anymore? Isabella heard the fear in his voice, the same terror of loss that had kept them dancing around their feelings for 3 years. She shifted to look directly into his eyes, her expression serious. Then we'll deal with that together, she said. Nathan, I'm not going to lie. The thought of not working with you every day terrifies me. You've been my professional partner for 3 years. But I'd rather risk that partnership for the chance at something real than spend the rest of my life wondering what we could have been. Nathan stared at her for a long moment, then pulled her down for a kiss that was soft and lingering and full of promises. When they broke apart, his eyes were bright with determination. Okay, he said. We do this right. Completely above board. No one gets to question your qualifications or suggest you got where you are because of our relationship. No one gets to diminish what we've built professionally, Isabella agreed. And no one gets to tell us that what we feel is inappropriate or unprofessional, Nathan added, his voice gaining strength. Because what we have, what we've always had, is a partnership based on mutual respect, trust, and now love. Isabella's smile was radiant. I love when you get all CEO decisive. Do you? Nathan's grin was wicked as he flipped them over, pinning her beneath him with gentle playfulness. Should I start making executive decisions about how we spend our Sunday morning? That depends, Isabella said, her eyes dancing with mischief, on whether your executive decisions include coffee. Because I know you, Nathan Sterling, and you need caffeine before you can make any truly important choices. Nathan threw back his head and laughed. That genuine, unguarded sound that Isabella had fallen in love with years ago. See? This is exactly why I need you in my life. You keep me grounded. Keep me human. I keep you caffeinated, Isabella corrected, but her expression was soft with love. An hour later, they sat at Nathan's kitchen island sharing coffee and the Sunday Times, their fingers intertwined on the marble countertop. Isabella was still wearing Nathan's Stanford t-shirt, her blonde hair falling in waves around her shoulders, and Nathan couldn't stop staring at her like she was something miraculous. What? Isabella asked, catching him watching her read the business section. You're here, Nathan said simply. In my kitchen, in my shirt, reading my newspaper and stealing my coffee. 3 days ago I thought I was losing you to Dominic Hayes, and now you're stuck with me. Isabella finished, her smile warm and teasing. Stuck with you, Nathan repeated, bringing their joined hands to his lips. I can think of worse fates. Isabella's phone buzzed with a text message. She glanced at it, her expression shifting slightly. Dominic? Nathan asked, trying to keep his voice neutral. Just checking that I got home safely last night, Isabella said, showing him the message. He's a good man, Nathan. He deserves to know that I'm happy. Nathan felt a stab of something that might have been jealousy, followed immediately by gratitude. Dominic Hayes had been gracious in defeat, had encouraged Isabella to follow her heart even when it led away from him. Text him back, Nathan said quietly. Tell him you're exactly where you belong. Isabella looked at Nathan with such love that it took his breath away. She typed back quickly. I'm more than safe. I'm home. Thank you for helping me find my courage. The response came back almost immediately. That's all I wanted. Be happy, Isabella. Isabella set her phone aside and turned back to Nathan, her expression bright with joy and determination. So, Mr. Sterling, she said, her voice carrying a note of playful formality, what's our strategy for tomorrow morning? Nathan's grin was sharp and confident, the expression Isabella had seen him wear when closing impossible deals and conquering unconquerable markets. Tomorrow morning, Ms. Rodriguez, we show Sterling Tech exactly what a real partnership looks like. Professional and personal? Isabella asked. Professional and personal, Nathan confirmed. We've spent 3 years proving we're perfect business partners. Now we get to prove we're perfect life partners too. Isabella felt something settle in her chest, a piece she hadn't known she was missing, a sense of rightness that went deeper than professional compatibility or romantic attraction. This was what she'd been searching for without knowing it. A true partnership, someone who saw all of her and loved every piece. I love you, she said, the words still feeling new and miraculous on her tongue. I love you too, Nathan replied, his voice rough with emotion. And tomorrow we're going to start building something amazing together. As they sat in Nathan's sun-filled kitchen, planning their future over coffee and newspapers, Isabella realized that this was what happiness felt like. Not the dramatic, overwhelming rush she'd expected, but something quieter, steadier, the simple pleasure of being known completely and loved anyway. Outside, Seattle was waking up to another Sunday morning, but inside Nathan's penthouse, 2 people who had spent 3 years dancing around their feelings were finally ready to stop dancing and start living. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, board meetings and HR discussions, and the delicate navigation of changing from colleagues to partners in every sense of the word. But today they had coffee and each other and the promise of something beautiful just beginning. And sometimes, that's everything. Some Mondays change everything, and some loves are worth every risk. Isabella stood in front of the Sterling Tech building at exactly 8:45 a.m., wearing her navy Armani suit like armor, her blonde hair pulled back in her signature chignon. To anyone watching, she looked like the same perfectly professional executive assistant who had walked through these doors every morning for 3 years. But everything was different now. Nathan stood beside her, impeccable in his charcoal suit, his dark eyes holding hers with an intensity that made her pulse quicken. They'd arrived separately. Isabella from her apartment where she'd gone to change clothes. Nathan from his penthouse where they'd spent their first night together as more than colleagues. "Ready?" Nathan asked quietly, his fingers brushing against hers in the briefest touch. "Ready," Isabella confirmed, though her heart was beating like a drum against her ribs. The elevator ride to the 42nd floor was silent, but the air between them hummed with electricity. Isabella caught Nathan watching her reflection in the polished steel doors, his expression soft with wonder, like he still couldn't quite believe this was real. When the doors opened, Vivian Chen was waiting for them, her sharp eyes taking in their carefully maintained professional distance and the way they both looked like they were trying not to smile. "Good morning, you two," Vivian said, her voice carrying a note of knowing amusement. "I trust you both had a pleasant weekend?" Isabella felt heat rise in her cheeks, but Nathan's response was smooth and professional. "Very productive, thank you. Vivian, could we schedule a meeting with you and HR this morning? Isabella and I have something we need to discuss." Vivian's smile was brilliant. "I'll call Jennifer immediately. Conference room B at 10? "Perfect," Nathan said, then turned to Isabella. "Ms. Rodriguez, could you please bring the Morrison Group files to my office? We should review them before the meeting." The formality was carefully maintained, but Isabella caught the warmth in Nathan's eyes, the way his voice softened almost imperceptibly when he said her name. "Of course, Mr. Sterling." As they walked toward Nathan's office, Isabella was hyper-aware of every curious glance from their colleagues, every whispered conversation that stopped when they passed. Sterling Tech was like any other office. Gossip traveled faster than email, and she knew their relationship wouldn't remain secret for long. Inside Nathan's office, with the door safely closed, Nathan immediately crossed to where Isabella stood by his desk, his hands framing her face with familiar tenderness. "How are you feeling?" he asked softly. "Nervous," Isabella admitted. "Excited. Terrified. Like I'm about to jump off a cliff." "We're jumping together," Nathan reminded her, pressing a gentle kiss to her forehead. "Whatever happens in that meeting, whatever the board decides, whatever complications arise, we face them as partners." Isabella leaned into his touch, drawing strength from his certainty. "Partners in everything." "Partners in everything," Nathan confirmed. At exactly 10 a.m. they walked into conference room B to find Vivian Chen and Jennifer Walsh from HR waiting for them. Jennifer was a kind woman in her 50s who had always treated Isabella with respect, but her expression was carefully neutral as they took their seats. "Thank you both for coming," Nathan began, his voice carrying the calm authority that had made him one of Seattle's most successful CEOs. "Isabella and I wanted to inform you that our relationship has evolved beyond the professional." The words hung in the air like a confession. Jennifer's expression didn't change, but Vivian's smile was warm and unsurprised. "How long has this been developing?" Jennifer asked, her tone professional but not unkind. "Our feelings have been present for some time," Isabella said carefully, "but we only acted on them this weekend. We want to be completely transparent about the situation and ensure that we handle it appropriately." Jennifer nodded, making notes on her tablet. "I appreciate your honesty. What are you proposing in terms of your working relationship?" Nathan leaned forward slightly. "Isabella has been my executive assistant for 3 years, and her performance has been exemplary. Every promotion, every salary increase, every opportunity she's received has been based purely on merit. However, we understand that our personal relationship may create the appearance of impropriety. We're willing to restructure our reporting relationship," Isabella added. "Perhaps I could report to Vivian instead of directly to Nathan." Vivian's eyebrows rose. "I'd be honored to have Isabella on my team, but I have to ask, are you sure you want to change a partnership that's been so successful?" "What do you mean?" Nathan asked. Vivian looked between them, her expression thoughtful. "Nathan, your productivity, your decision-making, your overall performance has been consistently excellent for the past 3 years. Isabella, you've grown from an assistant to a trusted advisor, essentially functioning as Nathan's strategic partner. Why would we want to disrupt something that's clearly working?" Jennifer consulted her notes. "Our policy doesn't prohibit relationships between employees, even across reporting lines, as long as there are appropriate safeguards in place. Regular performance reviews, transparency about decision-making, clear documentation of professional achievements." Isabella felt a flutter of hope. "You mean we could continue working together?" "With modifications," Jennifer said. Quarterly reviews with myself and Vivian present. Any decisions regarding Isabella's compensation or advancement would need approval from the board. And complete transparency. No more late-night meetings behind closed doors without witnesses. Nathan's jaw tightened slightly. That seems excessive. It's protective, Vivian said gently. For both of you. No one will ever be able to suggest that Isabella's success is due to anything other than her abilities. Isabella reached out, covering Nathan's hand with hers. The first openly personal gesture they'd made in front of their colleagues. It's fair, Nathan. It protects what we've built professionally while allowing us to explore what we're building personally. Nathan looked down at their joined hands, then back up at Isabella's face. If you're comfortable with it, then so am I. Jennifer smiled for the first time since the meeting began. Excellent. I'll draw up the new protocols and have them ready for your review by Wednesday. Congratulations, by the way. Office romances don't always work out, but when they do, they can be beautiful. After Jennifer left, Vivian lingered behind, her expression warm with affection. How long have you known? Isabella asked. Known what? That Nathan's been in love with you since your first week? Or that you've been pretending not to notice for 3 years? Vivian's grin was wicked. Honestly, watching you two dance around each other has been the office's favorite entertainment. Nathan groaned. Please tell me it wasn't that obvious. Only to everyone with eyes, Vivian said cheerfully. The way you look at her when she's not watching, Nathan. The way you light up when he actually listens to your ideas, Isabella. You've been practically married for years. You just finally made it official. As they walked back to their offices, Isabella felt something she hadn't experienced in years. Pure, uncomplicated joy. The fears that had kept them apart for so long. The board's reaction, their colleagues' judgment, the complications of mixing business and pleasure. All of it had been manageable, workable, human. Ms. Rodriguez, Nathan said as they reached Isabella's desk, his voice carrying that note of formal playfulness that was already becoming their new normal. Could you please clear my schedule for lunch? I'd like to take someone very important to celebrate. Isabella's smile was radiant. Of course, Mr. Sterling, anyone I know. Just the most brilliant, beautiful, irreplaceable woman in Seattle, Nathan said, his eyes dancing with mischief. Think she'd be interested? I think she'd be honored, Isabella replied. As Nathan disappeared into his office, Isabella settled at her desk with a sense of completeness she'd never experienced before. Her computer showed Nathan's calendar, meetings, calls, appointments that she would manage with the same efficiency and dedication she'd always brought to her work. But now there was something more, something deeper underlying every professional interaction. Her phone buzzed with a text from Nathan. 3 years ago, I hired the best assistant in Seattle. This morning, I realized I'd been in love with her all along. Isabella typed back quickly. 3 years ago, I took a job working for the most brilliant CEO in the city. This morning, I realized I'd found my forever. Forever? Nathan texted back immediately. I like the sound of that. Isabella looked through the glass wall of Nathan's office, watching him work with the focused intensity that had first attracted her years ago. But now she could see something else. The way he glanced up periodically to catch her eye, the smile that played at the corners of his mouth when their gazes met, the subtle relaxation in his shoulders that came from not having to hide his feelings anymore. They had work to do, contracts to review, deals to close, the complex machinery of Sterling Tech to keep running smoothly. But now they would do it together in every sense of the word, partners in business and life, colleagues and lovers, two people who had found in each other everything they'd never known they were looking for. At 5:30 p.m., as the office began to empty, Nathan appeared at Isabella's desk, his suit jacket slung over his arm, his expression soft with contentment. Ready to go home? He asked. Isabella looked up at him. This man who had been her boss, her partner, her secret love, and now finally her future, and felt her heart swell with impossible happiness. Ready, she said, saving her work and gathering her things. As they walked toward the elevator together, Nathan's hand found hers, their fingers intertwining naturally. When the doors closed, leaving them alone, Nathan pulled Isabella into his arms, kissing her with all the passion and tenderness of a man who no longer had to hide his love. I love you, Isabella Rodriguez, he whispered against her lips. I love you too, Nathan Sterling, she whispered back. The elevator opened on the ground floor, and they stepped out into the Seattle evening, ready to build a life together that was everything they'd dreamed, and more than they'd ever dared hope for. Behind them, Sterling Tech rose into the twilight sky. 42 floors of glass and steel where two people had spent 3 years falling in love without admitting it, where professional partnership had bloomed into something deeper and more precious than either had imagined possible. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new projects, new opportunities to prove that love and business could coexist beautifully when built on a foundation of mutual respect, trust, and genuine partnership. But tonight they had each other, and the promise of forever stretching out before them like a gift. Because the best love stories aren't about finding someone perfect, they're about finding someone worth being imperfect with. 2 years later, some stories end where others begin, and some partnerships last forever. Isabella Sterling stood on the rooftop terrace of Sterling Tech, watching the Seattle skyline glow in the amber light of a Pacific Northwest sunset. 2 years had passed since that Monday morning when she and Nathan had walked into HR to confess their love, and the view from the 42nd floor had never looked more beautiful. She absently twisted the simple platinum band on her left ring finger, a ring Nathan had given her 6 months ago during a quiet moment in this same spot. With no fanfare, no elaborate proposal, just a whispered, "Marry me," and a promise that they would build something extraordinary together. Mrs. Sterling. Isabella turned to find Nathan approaching, devastating in his dark suit, his eyes holding the same wonder they'd carried for 2 years, like he still couldn't quite believe she was his. The title was new. They'd been married for exactly 3 weeks, in a small ceremony overlooking Elliott Bay with only their closest friends and family present. "Mr. Sterling," Isabella replied, her smile radiant. "How did the board meeting go?" "Better than expected." Nathan slipped his arms around her waist, pulling her close in the way that had become as natural as breathing. "The Singapore expansion is approved. The Tokyo partnership is moving forward, and Vivian officially accepted the promotion to COO. Isabella beamed. "She deserves it. She's been running half the company anyway." "Speaking of which," Nathan said, his voice carrying a note of carefully controlled excitement, "the board made another decision today." "Oh?" Nathan reached into his jacket pocket, withdrawing a sleek folder with the Sterling Tech logo. "They approved the proposal for Sterling & Associates International. Congratulations, partner. You're now the co-founder and chief strategic officer of our new consulting division." Isabella stared at the folder, her heart pounding. For months, she and Nathan had been developing a proposal for a new branch of Sterling Tech, an international consulting firm that would leverage their combined expertise to help emerging markets develop sustainable technology infrastructure. It was ambitious, innovative, and everything Isabella had dreamed of when she'd first studied international relations at Georgetown. "Nathan," she breathed, opening the folder to see her name printed in elegant script as Chief Strategic Officer. "Are you serious?" "Dead serious." Nathan's grin was brilliant. "Your vision, your expertise, your passion for global development. This is your company, Isabella. I'm just lucky enough to be your partner." Isabella threw her arms around Nathan's neck, kissing him with all the joy and gratitude and overwhelming love that filled her chest. When they broke apart, both were laughing, giddy with the promise of new adventures. "We're really doing this," Isabella said, wonder in her voice. "Building something together." "We've been building something together for 5 years, Nathan corrected. "This is just the next chapter." Isabella looked out over Seattle, thinking about the woman she'd been when she first walked into Sterling Tech. Ambitious but uncertain, professional but hidden, brilliant but afraid to reach for what she really wanted. That woman had thought she was applying for a job as an executive assistant. She'd had no idea she was walking toward the love of her life, toward a partnership that would reshape everything she thought she knew about success and happiness. "I have something for you too," Isabella said, reaching into her purse to withdraw a small wrapped box. Nathan's eyebrows rose. "What's the occasion?" "New beginnings," Isabella said simply, handing him the box. Nathan unwrapped it carefully, revealing a vintage compass with an inscription on the back. "For the man who helped me find my true north. Love always, Isabella." Nathan's eyes brightened with emotion as he read the inscription. "Isabella, you told me once that I was your compass," Isabella said softly. "But Nathan, you were mine first. You helped me discover who I was meant to be, what I was capable of becoming. You saw me when I couldn't see myself." Nathan pulled her close, burying his face in her neck. "I love you so much it still scares me sometimes." "Good scared or bad scared?" Isabella asked, running her fingers through his hair. "Good scared," Nathan murmured against her skin. "The kind of scared that reminds me how precious this is. How lucky I am to have found you." They stood together on the rooftop where their professional lives had begun, where Nathan had first taught Isabella to see Seattle through his eyes, where they'd shared coffee and strategy sessions, and the gradual realization that they were perfect partners in every way that mattered. "Do you ever think about what would have happened if I hadn't gone to that charity gala?" Isabella asked. "If I'd never accepted Dominic's invitation?" Nathan considered the question seriously. "I think we would have found our way to each other eventually. Maybe it would have taken longer. Maybe we would have been more stubborn about it, but this," he gestured between them, "this was inevitable. We're inevitable." Isabella smiled, loving his certainty, loving the way he said the word inevitable like it was the most beautiful word in the English language. "Besides," Nathan added with a wicked grin, "I was about 30 seconds away from making a complete fool of myself at that gala. If you hadn't left with Hayes, I probably would have cut in on your dance and caused a scene." "Nathan Sterling causing a scene over a woman?" Isabella laughed. "The Seattle business community would never have recovered. They'll have to get used to it," Nathan said, spinning her around the rooftop like they were dancing to music only they could hear. "I plan to spend the rest of my life making it very clear that you're the most important thing in my world." As the sun set over Elliott Bay, painting the sky in shades of gold and rose, Isabella thought about all the Monday mornings ahead of them. Coffee shared over strategy sessions, meetings where they'd finish each other's sentences, late nights working side by side on projects that would change the world. But now there would be more. Lazy Sunday mornings in bed, dinner parties with friends who'd watched their love story unfold, quiet evenings where they could simply exist together without agendas or deadlines. "Ready to go home, Mrs. Sterling?" Nathan asked, offering her his arm with theatrical gallantry. Isabella looked at him, her husband, her partner, her best friend, the man who had seen her potential before she'd seen it herself, and felt her heart swell with impossible happiness. "Ready, Mr. Sterling," she said, taking his arm. "Though I should warn you, I'm planning to steal your coffee tomorrow morning." "You've been stealing my coffee for 5 years," Nathan pointed out. "Yes, but now it's legal," Isabella said with sparkling eyes. Nathan threw back his head and laughed, that genuine, unguarded sound that had first made Isabella fall in love with him years ago. As they walked toward the elevator that would take them down to their car, their life, their future, Isabella realized that some love stories don't end with a kiss or a wedding or a business success. The best love stories never end at all. They just keep beginning day after day, choice after choice, partnership after partnership, until two people can't imagine existing apart because they've become something greater together than either could be alone. The elevator doors closed on Nathan and Isabella Sterling, and Sterling Tech settled into the Seattle evening, its windows glowing with the warm light of a company built on innovation, excellence, and the radical idea that the best partnerships, in business and in life, are built on love. 42 floors below, the city hummed with its own stories of ambition and hope. But on the rooftop where it all began, the echo of laughter lingered like a promise that some dreams really do come true, and some partnerships really do last forever. What did you think of Nathan and Isabella's story? Did you see yourself in their journey of finding love in unexpected places? Your participation in the channel is very important. Please leave your opinion in the comments. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed the story, please subscribe to our channel and leave a comment below letting us know what you thought. Your feedback and support mean a lot to us. Stay tuned for more exciting stories.